Alright, logic statements. So, there actually is a branch of study called logic where there's lots of different logic statements that you can prove whether they're true or false. So, logic is connected in math in that it helps a lot of proofs in mathematics. So, we're going to go over some very basic logic statements. But here's some helpful vocabulary. I apologize that it's a little blurry. But a conditional statement, we say if P then Q. So here's our saying, and this little sign is the conditional statement. So if P then Q. And we'll look at some examples of what that looks like in just a minute. Then we have the converse. Converse is just the P, Q flipped. So instead of if P then Q, it's now if Q then P. Just like it says right here. Okay, then we have the inverse. Okay, this little squiggly sign, you can't see it very well, is not. So what the inverse is just basically the opposite of the conditional statement. It's if not P, then not Q. And then the contrapositive is kind of the opposite of the converse. Instead of saying if Q, then P, it's if not Q, then not P. Okay? And so that's kind of the statements that we're going to be dealing with for these logic statements. We did example 2. I have this written first. I think it's a good example to start with. Okay, so the P statement, so P and Q are statements. So over here we're saying if P then Q, if Q then P. P and Q, those are statements that we're going to make. So for example, the P statement for this example is I get good grades. And the Q statement is I do my homework. So the first, we're just saying I get good grades when I do my homework. And we're going to change it to a logic statement. Okay, the conditional is if P then Q. So we're going to say if I get good grades, then I do my homework. Okay, and then the converse. The converse is just flipping it. If I do my homework, then I get good grades. Okay, so there's your conditional statement and your converse. Now let's keep those two statements together, but now let's do the inverse. So if I get good grades, how would I make that negative? It's if I don't get good grades. So we're going to say if I don't get good grades, so there's my not P, then I do my homework, but we're negating it, so it's I don't do my homework. That's the inverse. It's the opposite. I'm going to put opposite quotations, but it's the opposite of the conditional statement. It's negating the conditional statement. So not really opposite, but negating. Now the contrapositive, we're just going to be negating or making it negative on the converse. So we're going to say if I don't do, so if not Q. So if I don't do my homework, then I don't get good grades. Okay, so hopefully you saw how that worked and it makes sense. Let's do some more examples. So this was example 1. Two parallel lines cut by a transversal have a set of congruent alternate interior angles. So we got to divide this up into two statements. So my P statement is going to be two parallel lines cut by a transversal. this a little less thick. Okay, Q would be I'm going to say they have a set of congruent alternate interior angles. Okay, so let's do if P then Q. So we're going to say if two parallel lines, so here's my P statement. I guess I should probably say are cut, just so it makes a little bit more sense grammatically. If two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then they have a set of congruent alternate interior angles. Okay, now the converse, we're just going to flip that. We're going to say if they have a set of congruent alternate interior angles. I'm just going to abbreviate a little bit so we don't have to write all these out. Then two parallel lines are cut by a transversal. Alright, so we're going to try to shorten this up a little bit. So remember, the inverse is just going to be negating the P. So remember, the P is two parallel lines are cut by a transversal. So we're going to say two parallel lines aren't cut by a transversal. I forgot the if at the beginning. Then, what was my Q? They have a set of congruent alternate interior angles. We're going to say they don't have a set of alternate interior angles. Okay, and then the contrapositive, we're going to say if they don't have a set of alternate interior angles. Remember, we're just negating the converse. If they don't have a set of alternate interior angles, then two parallel, that's the sign for parallel, lines aren't cut by alright. So let's go ahead and look at one more example. Okay, snakes are reptiles. So my first statement is just going to be snakes, and my second statement is just going to be reptiles. Okay, conditional statement, if P then Q. So if snakes, then reptiles. Okay, the converse. So it's just kind of writing it in the opposite order. If reptiles, then snakes. Okay, so if snakes then reptiles, the converse is just if reptiles and snakes. Okay, So once again, P is snakes, Q is reptiles. Okay, the inverse, we're just negating or making the negative statement of the conditional statement. We're going to say, if not snakes, then not reptiles. The contrapositive is just negating the converse. So, if not reptiles, then, not snakes. Okay, and then what we do is we just take these statements and we go through with logic and math. We're not going to do this really, but it's just a good introduction for you. Is we would go through and say which ones of these are actually true, which ones are not true, and we'd be able to use these statements to prove things mathematically. But this is just an introduction of how we would use logical statements in math. So you're just going to have an assignment where you're just going to write down those 4 different statements from a given phrase, and just to get used to what a conditional statement looks like and what logic statements look like. So if you have any questions, let me know.